Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, hi, I'm Jennifer. I make beading tutorials. Please do subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications so you get notified whenever I post a new tutorial. Today we'll be learning how to make this beautiful beaded purse. This tutorial has been a long time coming, so let's get to it. So before we start this tutorial, I have to let you all know that it was a struggle creating this content, because if you can see, I used two different beads for this bag, but they were of the same color, so it was kind of confusing for you all to understand. I had to make a new bag from scratch, but in a contrasting color so that it will be very easy to understand, because what is worth doing is worth doing well. Let's get to it. For this project, you need some round shaped sugar beads. We'll be using this in size 12 millimeters. You'd also need some plastic round beads in size 6. Then you'd also need your fishing line, 0.70 millimeters. That is what I always use. Then lastly, your scissors. That's all you'll be needing for this. To start, you want to cut out some fishing line. We'll be using this much. Then on the left hand side of your fishing line, you want to add one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, one big bead, again one small bead, and one big bead. Draw everything down except the last big one. Then you cross both ends into the last big one. Okay, draw that down, and this is what you have. Okay, to continue, on the right hand side of our fishing line, we want to just add one small bead. Okay, just draw that down. Then on the left, you add one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead. Drag down the rest except the last big one and cross both ends into the last big one. Draw it down, and this is what you have. To continue, if you remember, the last place we added the small bead was on the right, and on the left we added one small, one big, one small, one big. So this time we are going to interchange, switch it up. Now the small bead would be on the left, okay, and on the right would be small bead, big bead, small bead, and big bead. Cross both ends into the last big bead you added. Draw it down, make sure it's tight. Alright, so we are progressing. To continue, you want to interchange this step again. So the last place we added the small bead was on the left. This time it's going to be on the right. And on the left we add one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead. Cross both ends into the last big bead. Draw that down. Okay, let's repeat what we usually do. We interchange again. The last place the small bead was added was on the right. This time the small bead would be added on the left. So one small bead on the left, draw that down, and on the right we add one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead. Then we cross into the last big bead. How many have we done so far? We have done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the height of this would be 8, so we still have 3 more to go. Okay, so let's keep going. The last place the small bead was added was on the left, so on the right, one small bead on the right, and on the left, one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead. Cross both ends. The next step, you interchange again. Where was the small bead added on last? On the right. Okay, so on the left this time we add one small bead, drag that down, and on the right we add one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead. Cross both ends into the last big bead. Alright, we have done how many so far? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have one more left. The last small bead was added where? On the left. So this time the small bead would go on the right. So one small bead on the right, and on the left we add one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead. Cross both ends into the last big bead, drag it down, and yeah, we have completed the 8th ring. Okay, let's do a recount. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, it's complete. The next thing we want to do is to move to another line, because as you can see we have gotten to the final height of the bag, which is 8 rings. Okay, so I want to repeat this same step I just did. I'm not going to interchange. The last step I just did was to add one small bead on the right, and on the left I added one small, one big, one small. So that is what I am going to repeat again. I hope that's clear. Okay, we add that, then we close with the last big bead as usual. Drag that down. Okay, we still want to repeat this step again. I just hope this tutorial won't be confusing. Okay, so you want to repeat this step again. On the right again, you add one small bead, and on the left you add one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead. You close that with the last big one. Guess what? We are going to repeat this again. So on the right we add one small bead, and on the left we add one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead. Drag that all the way down, and whew, we are finally done with that step. Now the next thing we want to do, if you notice, you can see like a flower shaped design or a circle kind of design there. So to complete that circle now, pay attention. We are going to add one small bead, pass it through that next big bead there. Okay, then still on that right hand side of your fishing line, you are going to add one small bead. Okay, one small bead. Then on the left hand side you would add just one small bead and one big bead. That's all. Then you close both ends into the big bead, and now the circle is complete. You see that beautiful design it just formed. Alright, so the next step is to add on the left hand side of your fishing line one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead. And on the right side we'd add just one small bead. Then we cross both ends into the last big bead there. Okay, now we are at another incomplete circle, and to complete it, do you remember the step? We add one small bead to the right hand side of our fishing line, pass through the next big bead there. And still on that right hand of your fishing line, you want to add one small bead, and on the left you just add one small bead and one big bead. Then you cross both ends into the big bead. It seems easy, no? Well, hopefully you get the hang of it. Next step, repeat what we did. On the left hand side, one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead. On the right, one small bead. Then we cross both ends into the last big bead. Draw that down. To complete the circle, you know what comes next, yeah? One small bead, go into the next big bead with the right hand side of your fishing line. Still on that right side of your fishing line, you want to add one small bead, and on the left you add just one small bead, one big bead, cross both ends into the big bead. Draw that down. Okay, the next step, you know what we do. On the left we add one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead. On the right we add one small bead, and we cross both ends into the last big bead. To complete the circle, on the right hand side of the fishing line, we add one small bead and we pass it through the next big bead there. To complete it, on the right we add just one small bead, and on the left we add just one small bead and one big bead. Then we cross both ends into the last big bead, and finally you are done with the base of this bag. This is what your work should look like. Now look. If you look closely on the edges, you see two beads, but on the body you see 3 beads, 3 beads, 3 beads. Why is that so? Well, I like to call these places the sensitive edges. These are the places that make up the bottom part of your bag. Also, if you can notice, on the body of this bag, 6 beads make up a circle, but on the sensitive edges it's going to be a little bit more different. They'll be equal to 5 beads each. If you do not understand what all these things mean, just keep watching, you'll understand better. Okay, let's continue. On the left hand side of my fishing line, I want to add one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, one big bead, and on the right hand side I'd add just one small bead. Then I'll cross both ends into the big one. Draw that down. Okay, I'm going to repeat the same step again because I'm starting a new line now. Okay, so repeat the same step again. One small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead on the left hand side of our fishing line, and on the right we add just one small bead. Close both ends into the big one. Draw it down. Alright, now it's time to complete our circle, and to do that, you know what we do. We add one small bead, we go into the next big bead there. Alright, still on the right hand side we add just one small bead. Then on the left hand side we add just one small bead and one big bead. Then we close both ends into the big one. Draw that down. Okay, let me explain what I said earlier. You see now the edges, 5 beads make up the circle, but on the body it is 6 beads, so it is different. Okay, so we are on another sensitive edge, and the other side is a sensitive edge as well. So to complete this, we do our usual step. On the left we add one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, and one big bead. Then on the right we add one small bead, and we cross both ends into the last big bead. To complete the circle, we add one small bead on the right hand side, go into the next big bead. Yeah, still on that right hand side we add a small bead. Then on the left we add just one small bead and one big bead. then we cross both ends into the last big bead. Okay, we are progressing. So far we've done 2 sensitive edges. We want to continue with our usual step till we get to another sensitive edge. Okay, so our usual 1 small bead, 1 big bead, 1 small bead, 1 big bead on the left, on the right 1 small bead, and cross both ends into the big bead. So keep this going until you get to the other edge. Okay, let's go. Okay, I'm almost at the edge. Let me complete this real quick. Pass into the next bead. Still on the right, I add 1 small bead, and on the left I add 1 small bead, 1 big bead, 1 small bead, and 1 big bead. Then I cross both ends into the big bead. Draw that down, and okay, we are on a sensitive edge. So let's repeat our usual step. On the left, 1 small bead, 1 big bead, 1 small bead, and 1 big bead. And on the right, 1 small bead. Then I cross both ends into the last big one. To complete the circle, I add 1 small bead to the right, go into the next big bead. Still on the right, I add 1 small bead, and on the left, I add 1 small bead and 1 big bead. Then I cross both ends into the last big bead. Okay, that is complete now, and as you can see, we have just 5. Alright, let's keep on going. On the left, 1 small bead, 1 big bead, 1 small bead, and 1 big bead. On the right, 1 small bead. We cross both ends into the big bead. Draw that down, complete the circle. On the right, we add 1 small bead, go into the next bead. Then on the left, we add 1 small bead and 1 big bead. Then on the right, we just add 1 small bead. Then we cross both ends into the big bead. Draw that down. Okay, so another sensitive edge is complete. To complete the last one, you want to repeat the same thing. On the left, you add 1 small bead, 1 big bead, 1 small bead, and 1 big bead. Then on the right hand side, you add 1 small bead, then close both ends with the last big bead. Draw that down. Now it's time to complete the incomplete circle. You add 1 small bead first, pass it through the next big bead there. Then still on the right, you add 1 small bead on the right. And on the left, you add 1 small bead and 1 big bead, and close both ends with the last big bead. Okay, so the third sensitive edge is complete. Keep that going until you get to the last part there. We are almost at the last. Let's complete this second to the last one real quick. We will complete the circle with one bead. Then on the right we add one small bead, and on the left we add one small bead and one big bead. Okay, we are the last part now, but hey, we want to do our usual, we usually do a first step where we add one small, one big, one small, then on the right we add one small and close it. But no, we won't do that. This time we're just going to pass the bead directly to it. Okay, you see that? Then we just close it. We're just going to complete that circle. We won't do that first step we usually do. We just complete it directly. Okay, because it is a sensitive edge there. We do not want that place to be equal to 6. We want just 5, and that is what we're going to do. I hope you understand that. Now that is complete, and as you can see, it is equal to 5 circles. All edges are equal to 5. Those are the sensitive edges. So we're finally done with our first line. We're progressing really good. It's time to begin a new line, and when beginning a new line, I said something before. Our usual step, we are going to repeat it twice. Okay, so it's one small, one big, one small, one big on the left, and on the right one small bead. Then you cross both ends into the big bead, draw that down, repeat this step again. On the left, one small, one big, one small, one big, and on the right one small. Then you cross both ends into the last big bead. That is what you want to do. Then you complete the circle. You add one small bead, pass it through the next big bead. Then on the left hand side you add one small bead and one big bead, while on the right you add one small bead. Close both ends with the last big bead. So you want to keep up with this step until you go all around the bag. You go all around the bag. No, you do not need to be mindful of any sensitive edges. It's just going to be our usual step. So do that until you get to the last place, almost to the last place again. I want to repeat that step we did. I am on the second to the last place now. I would quickly complete that. Add one small to the right, close with the last big one. Now we're on the last place. To complete this, like we usually do, we're just going to join it directly. Okay, we won't add that first step before we complete the circle. No, we'll just complete the circle directly, and to do that we add one small bead, pass it through the next big one, and then we close with one small, one big, and one small. Okay, that is complete, and we're finally done with the second line. We are going to do the third line now. I think you should know how to start a new line now, and you should know how to close that line. So I'm gonna leave you to it to do the third line on your own. I'm finally done with the third line. Now we are on the final line now. This is how your work should look like. As you can see, it has 2 equal edges and the body is equal as well. I also want you to pay attention to those edges. They are sensitive edges as well. Like we said before, 5 beads make their circle, unlike the body where 6 beads make the circle. So now we are on the body. To complete it, we add one small, one big, one small, one big as usual, and on the right we add one small bead, then we close both ends with the last big bead. Drag that down. We want to repeat that step because we're forming a new line. Okay, one small bead, one big bead, one small bead, one big bead on the left, then on the right you add one small bead and close both ends with the last big one. To complete it, you add one small bead, go into the next big bead, and on the left you add one small bead, one big bead. On the right you add one small bead and you cross both ends into the big bead. Okay, that is all for that part. Now look, we are on a sensitive edge now. Okay, and this time we won't repeat our first usual step. We'll just pass it directly to the next big bead. We'll just close that because we want the total beads there to be equal to 5 and not 6. Alright, then we complete the circle as usual. One small bead, one big bead on the left, and on the right one small bead. Then we cross both ends into the big one. Draw that down. The first sensitive edge is complete. Moving on to the next one, we want to repeat the same thing. We won't do that first step, we'll just pass it directly to the next bead. Okay, we add one small bead, pass it through the next big bead. On the left you add one small bead, one big bead, and on the right you add one small bead. Close it with the big one. And yeah, that is complete. We want to keep the body going as usual. We know how to do that. Let's do that until we meet the next sensitive edge. We are on another sensitive edge now. To complete that, we add one small bead, pass it directly to the next bead. Then we are going to add one small bead, one big bead on the left hand side, and on the right we add one small bead. Then we cross both ends into the big bead. Another sensitive edge, repeat the same thing. One small bead directly to the next bead, and on the left one small bead, one big bead, and the right one small bead. Cross both ends into the big bead, and there you have it. You have completed that part. Now you just keep going with the body until you complete it and we get to the final part of the bag. We are on the second to the last one now. We'll just complete it real quick. Complete the circle there. Add one small, one big. To the left, and on the right we add one small bead. Cross both ends into the bead. And finally we are on the last one. So to complete it, we'll just pass our small bead directly into the next bead. Okay, pass it through like that. To close the circle, we add on the left one small bead, one big bead, and on the right we add one small bead. Then we close both ends into the last big bead. And that's it for the body of this bag. That's it for the bag. Now we just want to pass around our fishing line, and when we are done, we cut that out nice and neatly. Okay, when you're passing around your fishing line, do it corner by corner. Follow the pattern with which you designed the bag. It is time to finally attach the handle of our bag. On the side, we want to locate the middle right there on each side. As you can see, we'll go on to cut out some fishing line and pass it through that bead in the middle. Make sure it's long enough. Then you join both ends like this. We'll proceed to pass the beads into the fishing line. Okay, I'll be adding about 16 beads. Once that is done, I will then locate the middle on the other side of the bag. This time I will separate my fishing line. Then I will pass both ends across that bead. The right goes to the left and the left goes to the right. Draw that out, make sure it's very tight. Then we'll pass through the handle again, join both ends. You want to go over it again so the handle will be very firm. And finally, we'll just pass around our fishing line. Pass it around, remember, corner by corner. Then you just cut out the excess. And this is what you have. We are finally done with our bag. Phew, this was a tough one. This is probably the longest tutorial I have ever done. I really hope you found this helpful. Please, if you did, do not forget to like, subscribe to the channel, share with friends who might find it helpful. Next tutorial, I'll teach you how to tack an inner pouch for this purse. Until next time, goodbye.